I think it's undeniable that we just witnessed the end of an era in Quebec. That era is not only about François Legault, it's about a political philosophy. Those those ideas, unfortunately, turned out to be a failure in terms of demands to the federal and in terms of promises that were so bright and so good to be true. And 7 years later, we are with disappointment in the population. I think we can say that.
So that obviously is Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, the leader of the PQ, reacting earlier this week to François Legault's having departed, resigned as leader of the CAQ. And Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is on the phone. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I should let people know, we said you'd be in studio. You're not in studio because we're finding out today there's a by-election call in Chicoutimi.
Yes, so I have 5 hours of car before I reach Chicoutimi so that you can see me posting, hanging posters in Chicoutimi tonight, and I'll have a press conference tomorrow morning.
All right. That's the fun part of being a politician. So let me get to what you just mentioned, because I have a couple of questions. I know your reaction when I first heard it was this idea, as you called it here, what was it, to the federal government, right? Demands to the federal government that hadn't been met. Now, I understand, I think you said there were 21. It doesn't matter that we count them. What I'm trying to understand is, and people have brought this up, I'm sure you've heard the same thing, at least I hope you have. People said, you know what, we don't really care so much about this as the issues that concern us day to day. Affordability, it's too expensive to pay rent, to go to the store, to do whatever. Yet you seem to be focused on this government's failure, not so much in those areas as you are in request to the federal government, I guess, for autonomy. Am I accurate in saying that?
No, unfortunately not. It's the exact opposite. It is precisely the issues that matter to the population that are connected to those failures. So the federal government over the past 10 years, especially under Trudeau, but it's continuing under Carney, imposed on Quebec and other provinces unlimited immigration, with the impact that the cost of living, the cost of housing, I mean, they generated a housing crisis, and they were warned by their own public servants in Ottawa. Before proceeding, they were told, if you go ahead with such an increase in the population, there's no way we're going to build houses at the same rhythm, and you're going to have your cost of housing explode, and a problem of homelessness as well. And so that's very down to earth. And Legault went in 2022 in election saying, give me a strong mandate, and you'll see I'll get the full powers in immigration. So we have our own planning, and let's come back in time. 10, 15 years ago, Quebec's immigration system was a success. We had good integration, no complaints, and stability of the French language and of services. So that's one very down-to-earth example where I think many Quebecers are not happy with the way the federal government choose an ideological drift over their well-being. Same thing for healthcare. People care about healthcare. And François Legault, 2 times, went in elections saying, listen, we're so strong, we're going to get, and provinces, because all provinces had the same demands, we're going to get $6 billion back from the federal and transfers for healthcare, and you'll see we'll improve the system. At the end, they got only $1 billion out of $6 billion. So, of course, if you have $5 billion not available for your health system, it will translate in problems. And that's very down to earth, and that's directly concerning Quebecers. And many examples like this, things that are more maybe frivolous, but to have one tax report instead of having 2. They were confident they would get that, and that was never achieved. And then you would go in culture, French language, or any other topic. And that's the irony. That's what I said when Legault left. I said, it's pretty ironic that a politician ran on the idea that you could set aside completely the question of Quebec's relations to the federal government and end up talking about Justin Trudeau almost every week to complain about your power, lack of influence on the situation. It was the case, if you remember, during the pandemic, where we had no control over the airport, and it was a mess in terms of money being spent, the amount of waste of money that is involved. So no, it's very connected to people's daily issues. And the other point I made, because it's not only about the federal, simply that the CAQ went ahead with promises that were not true, and I think they knew it. I mean, it was so little work behind what they promised. It was very not serious in terms of making your homeworks before promising something to the population, and it ended up with major failures in many areas, nothing to do with the federal, but having to do with the lack of rigor or lack of method in working before promising something.
So, first of all, you're being a bit general there, vague. When you talk about promises broken, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Are you talking about Northvolt? Or are you talking about Saclick? What are you referring to?
Oh, there's so many of them. Remember, they were promising in 2018 that we would see a doctor, everyone would see a doctor within 90 minutes. Everyone would have a doctor. Every family would have a spot in a childcare CPE. And I mean, it goes on and on. There would be no more traffic in the 450 area, and they would change so many things. And the most famous of it is the third link in Quebec City.
Right.
I mean, they promised it for $4 billion, and now we know that there was no study, not even a thought, before promising that.
Okay.
And that's something to learn, I think. Expectations, I mean, I want to be a change in that sense that we will promise things, and sure, there is marketing in politics, that's obvious. But the work has to be serious before you go ahead. Otherwise, there's no trust and people disconnect.
So I want to ask you, with respect to, promises, and we've talked about this before, there's actually a poll out this morning, data poll, a Palace data poll, a 338 Canada put together that, I'll read you just the headline, which I'm sure you've seen. It says, most Quebecers oppose sovereignty, even more reject another referendum. This is not news to you because it's been like this now for a little while. Polls have not really changed a whole lot. I'm curious when you see something like this, and given the fact that you're not going to have the Coalition Avenir Quebec to go against, right? If you point at all the bad things that they've done, be they broken promises, relations with the Fed, they're not likely to be the government in power. Now you have to go up against two parties that are basically in transition. You have the Liberals, who will have a new leader. You have the CAQ, by the way, who will end up with a new leader. What does this do to change your game plan going forward as to how you're going to take on these people?
Well, I think people at least give us time in terms of listening to what we have to say. So if you see people who intend to vote for us, and you look also at people for whom we're the second choice, we get many people to listen to what we have to say because we're serious in what we deliver on all topics. So on the specific topic of Quebec's independence, that's why I'm insisting on what was actually promised under Couillard and what was actually promised and said under Legault. Both said you can set those questions aside. Doesn't matter that we send 90 billion a year to Ottawa for the greatest amount of waste ever in terms of programs that are duplicating what we're already doing or serving an ideology that doesn't deliver anything for the population. They said, I'm going to take care of real down-to-earth things, and we're going to set that question aside. And it's important to me to say, after 8 years of Legault, look at what happened. I mean, it's not going in the right direction, and the waste continues in Ottawa, so we need to draw conclusions from that and unite behind our capacity as any people or democracy in the world, our capacity to end that duplication, to end the waste, and end policies such as an immigration that were just an ideological drift that cost us a lot, and have more intelligent policies, and that's what I'm building. So today we had a new candidate, Sandra Hernandez. She works for the UN right now in Colombia, but she worked in Afghanistan, she worked in Haiti, she worked in all places with very, very important responsibilities, and she's willing to quit her job because we have that society project. So we'll keep on proposing and having that discussion based on facts, based on what we need to learn from Couillard's and Legault's attempt to not realize that we're sending $90 billion dollars a year to Ottawa in return of very little services and a lot of waste.
We are speaking with Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, leader of the Parti Quebecois, who's in the car on his way to a by-election call in Chicoutimi. This is to replace André Laforêt, the CAQ minister who left. So, Monsieur Plamondon, let me pick up on something you said. You described, of course, this CAQ government, the François Legault in any way, as well as the Philippe Couillard government, as ideologies. And I wondered to myself, aren't you asking Quebecers then who might consider voting PQ to just replace one ideology with a different one that you have? How is yours any different?
I referred to, using the word ideology, I referred to the federal government and the ways that comes with it. In terms of who the Legault and the Couillard governments are, we're rather dealing with governments that came to power saying, we can set aside those questions, set aside the 90 billions we're sending to Ottawa. It doesn't matter. We'll fix everything. Turned out to be not true.
Well, I will point out the Liberals left with a $6 billion surplus. You can say that about the CAQ with a $13 billion deficit, but they're not the same thing.
They're not the same thing, but they're generally a deterioration of services and institutions in Quebec. That I don't think we're heading in the right direction.
Okay.
I don't think nobody feels that education, transports, healthcare is heading in the right direction. I think we can agree on that.
And how would healthcare be, given the fact that we have spent so much money on healthcare, and now with this bloating, Santé Quebec, which apparently is not doing much of a job, how would it be any different in a PQ government? How would, separation or whatever, if we eventually got to there, how would it make it any better?
So there's two different points. In the normal course of the management of the state, I don't want to make announcements that will be part of the electoral campaign right today. It's not the time, but I'm very, very, very critical about the size of the state in Quebec with regards to the failures in services to the population. I mean, it's not only Santé Québec, it's in transport, it's all kinds of new entities around the government, and the SACLIC scandal as well. So something's wrong there, and I will have announcements later on. But there's one thing: we need a much more tight management of public funds, and we need to redirect resources towards concrete and down-to-earth services to the population. Now, if you ask me what Ottawa has to do with that, well, obviously, if all provinces agreed that our fair share of healthcare transfers would be, for the case of Quebec, around $6 billion, and we got only one. Obviously, $5 billion, it changes a lot. And the budget of an independent Quebec shows that the amount of duplication between what Ottawa and Quebec is doing, and that is aside from another problem, that is governments that don't agree and end up wasting time not agreeing and not moving forward because there are too many layers of government. All those questions are very down to earth in terms of our capacity to finance those services. So yes, the money we send to Ottawa is an issue in terms of our financial capacity to take care of the population, and we want to improve that through independence.
There's another overriding story today. What's going on right now with the U.S. president, Greenland, China, Canada, all that is in play. And someone asked the question, let's say Quebec was independent. Doesn't that simply open the door as an invitation to Donald Trump to simply walk in and say, hey, you know what? Greenland, Quebec, it's all the same. We'd like to take over Quebec. I mean, aren't you better off in the Confederation that way as one country, as a whole?
No, not at all. If Donald Trump wants to walk in Canada, in any province or all provinces tomorrow, I assure you he can. There's no way the Canadian Army can stand up to the American Army. And of course, that question is very theoretical because that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the same way that the U.S. is not going to attack Denmark and Greenland. There's a lot of uncertainty, of course, with Donald Trump, and he says many things in his book, The Art of Deal Making, I think.
The Art of the Deal, yeah.
Yeah, so you know the technique. You really take an aggressive stance and you try to squeeze a profit. And if you translate that to politics, we have a very different approach to what we're used to. But are the U.S. going to attack Greenland?
No. Okay, well, let's take that. Let's take that out of the equation for a second. What if he simply said, and he said this before, about annexing Canada? He might have been joking, but he said it repeatedly. Are you saying that if Donald Trump, under a PQ government, came to Quebec and said, you know what, we could use what you have in Quebec, you have lumber, you have water, you have critical minerals, and we will pay you X number of billions of dollars in order to do that?
No, nobody's for sale right now.
Not for sale.
I lived in Denmark for more than a year. I speak Danish. And don't expect the Danes to put Greenland for sale.
Okay.
I know them enough. It's not going to happen either. Quebec's not for sale. And talk to Albertans. There's a strong independence movement there. Nothing's for sale. But there's a reconfiguration of what I would call blind globalization. So the U.S. are saying, we've paid more than our fair share in security and military. We expect now everybody to do their share. And we will not allow foreign adversaries, foreign influence, such as China and Russia, threat our region of influence. It's not the first time the U.S. does that, under Democrats as well. But then I think right now, and I hope I'm correct, everything happens or is possible in politics, but the likeliness of U.S. turning against NATO and Europe or turning against Canada and Quebec, I don't see it. So
all right.
It's the same last year when everybody was panicked about tariffs, and Jean Charest and Jean Chrétien, even Stephen Harper went around to say that sovereignty is very important. You understand that as a sovereignist, I kind of smile in the same way that today Mark Carney recognized that Greenland had a right to self-determination, and you know that Greenland has independentist views towards Denmark, and Denmark has been very respectful of that. Mm-hmm. So it's all a very interesting situation where I think Canada here uses a double discourse, depending on if we're talking about Quebec, Alberta, or if we're talking about Greenland and other nations. But in any case, I think we need to slow down and calm down here. And the worst thing so you asked me what Quebec would do? I wouldn't accelerate that kind of escalation. And there's a tendency, Doug Ford did it, and François Legault once said, you will see, I will make Donald Trump pay. There is no gain in accelerating that kind of negative energy and deterioration of friendly relationship for centuries. So let's slow down here and let's cool down in terms of not escalating, because nobody's going to win at that. Our neighbors are our neighbors. They've been the commercial partners for centuries. And we need to keep in mind that 75% of our exports are to the U.S. So let's take things one step at a time. And I don't think the U.S. will attack Greenland, just to be clear on that.
All right. I'm going to run out of time. I do want to ask you another thing, and I want to go up to what I started with. This new Palace data poll that comes out and basically says, you know what? There are people who would consider voting PQ but do not want a referendum. A large number of those, I think that number when they ask is in the 60%. I'm trying to frame this correctly. Being a pragmatist as opposed to an ideologue, right? If you want to become the next government to form power in Quebec, and you know that people do not want a referendum, yet might consider voting for you, are you prepared to simply say, if we win this election, given the fact that most Quebecers say they don't want separation or referendum, to at least wait for a second term?
That's not what I'm going to do. And I think you have to give to me that I've been quite consistent and quite clear. So the offer is very clear. And it's based on our evaluation of the best interest of Quebecers. And so some governments have been governing based solely on polls, and the CEQ was exactly that. They would have a poll every day and say something based on what they read in the poll. Expect a complete change in the political style. If the PQ comes in power and I'm premier, I will govern in terms of what I honestly think is the best interest of our society. I will read polls, but the bottom line is polls will not determine what I have to say to people.
That means you will hold a referendum come hell or high water if you're elected as Premier of Quebec.
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you, and I hope we get a chance to speak again soon. Thank you.
Next time in person.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.